Some stories make you wonder how long the warning signs were there before anyone noticed. Welcome back. On this channel, we break down real stories from 4chan, shared by people who saw things get worse, one step at a time. This one has a quiet tension that keeps tightening without making a scene. Sit back, turn the lights down, and tap the bell. Let's get into it. The fire had been out for almost 3 weeks by the time my company got around to sending me. That's normal for us. Ag claims sit in a queue until someone with a company car and no kids at home can be spared to drive 4 hours through corn. The address was outside a town called Vinton in Benton County, Iowa. Not really a town, more of a gas station and a Casey's and a stoplight that flashed yellow at night. My GPS took me off the highway onto a county road, then onto gravel, then onto what my company officially calls unimproved access, and what my dad would have called a driveway. The owner was waiting on the porch when I pulled up. Older guy, mid-60s maybe, in a Carhartt coat that had been washed about 1,000 times. He introduced himself as Wayne. Firm handshake, calluses you could feel through your own palm. He offered me coffee before we even talked about the barn. "You drove all the way from Des Moines?" he said. "Least I can do." His kitchen was clean. That's the part I want to say first, because later I kept coming back to it. The countertops were wiped. There were 2 mugs on a drying rack, both turned upside down. A calendar from the co-op hung by the fridge, and every square had something written on it in pencil. Feed order, vet, church potluck. Normal things. He handed me a folder. Inside were the receipts for the hay he'd lost, a copy of the fire marshal's report, and photographs he'd taken himself the morning after. Everything you could ask for. I've been doing this job long enough to know when a claim is going to be a headache, and this one was going to be the opposite. Clean paper, clean story, electrical short in an old junction box. The barn was insured for less than it was worth. He wasn't even asking for the max. We walked out to the burn site. He stayed a respectful distance behind me while I took my measurements and my photos. The smell was still there. That wet char, the sweet sour thing burnt hay has when the rain has been at it for a while. I asked the questions I'm supposed to ask. He answered them the way honest people answer, which is to say, slightly bored, because they've already told the story to the fire marshal, and to the sheriff, and to their brother-in-law. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen and something changed in his face. Not fear. More like inconvenience. He held up one finger to me and stepped away toward the house, phone against his ear, voice low. I stood in the wind for a minute. My rental was parked between me and the road. Beyond the burn site, there was another barn, further back, painted the same faded red as the one that had burned. Metal roof. No windows I could see from where I stood. The doors were shut with a chain, but the chain was hanging loose, unlocked, just wrapped around the handles for show. I want to be honest with you about why I walked over there. It wasn't a hunch. It wasn't instinct. It was that I had a checklist on my clipboard and one of the boxes said, "Other structures on property, condition of," and Wayne was still on the phone, and I had 10 minutes to kill. That's the whole reason. I unwrapped the chain and pulled the door open enough to slip inside. The smell hit me first, not fire. Something older, wet concrete and something under the wet concrete. The kind of smell that gets into your sinuses and stays there for the drive home. My eyes adjusted. The barn was mostly empty. No hay, no equipment. A tarp folded in one corner, a 5-gallon bucket. And in the middle of the floor, spaced out in a rough line, 4 rectangles of corrugated metal sheeting laid flat on the ground. I remember thinking, root cellar. That was my first thought. People out here store things underground. Potatoes, apples, whatever. The sheeting was to keep animals out. That's what I told myself as I walked closer, and when I nudged the first sheet with my boot and it slid an inch to the side, I honestly still thought root cellar. Under the sheet was a hole, not a cellar, a hole, straight-sided, about 4 feet by 6, going down maybe 8 or 9 feet, concrete walls, empty, dry. A rusted eye bolt was set into the wall near the top. My stomach did something I don't have a good word for. I moved to the next one. Same shape, empty, same eye bolt. The third one had water in the bottom, maybe 6 inches. A mattress was down there, one of those thin ones you'd find in a jail cell or a college dorm, dark with damp, sagging into the water. I pulled out my phone and I turned on the flashlight and I aimed it down. The walls of that one were scratched, not deep, not like a horror movie. Just short, shallow lines, dozens of them in the concrete, all within reach of where someone standing on that mattress could put their hands. Some of the lines were in clusters of 4, with a 5th crossed through, counting days. I remember counting the clusters. I got to somewhere around 140 before I made myself stop. Whoever had been down there long enough to lose track. I took photos. I don't remember deciding to. My hands did it while my head was somewhere else. Wide shot of the pit, close-up of the scratches, close-up of the eye bolt, close-up of the mattress. I moved to the 4th sheet and I couldn't make myself slide it. I photographed it closed instead. Then I put the sheets back exactly the way I'd found them. I remember being careful about the angle. I remember thinking, if the corner is off by 2 inches, he'll notice. So I lined it up with the seam in the concrete. I walked out of that barn and I wrapped the chain around the handles the way it had been. Loose, decorative. My rental was maybe 40 yards away. I made myself walk normal. Wayne was standing in the yard between me and the car. He wasn't close, maybe 15 yards. He was just standing there with his phone down at his side, looking at me. Not angry, not surprised, just looking. "You get everything you need?" he said. I said I did. I said I still had to check a couple things in the truck, and would he mind if I made a call to my office real quick, just to confirm a number on the deductible. He said, sure. He said it slowly. I got in the rental. I locked the doors. I did not make a call. I put the car in reverse and I backed down that driveway all the way to the county road because I did not want to turn around and give him my back. He watched me the whole way. When I got to pavement, I drove the speed limit into Vinton and pulled into the Casey's and sat in the parking lot for I don't know how long. My hands were shaking so badly on the steering wheel that I had to put them in my lap and press down. I ate a gas station sandwich I don't remember buying. Here's the part where you're supposed to say, I called my supervisor. I didn't. Our claims process would have flagged the property for a secondary inspection, which meant somebody in an office in Omaha would have called Wayne first to schedule it. That's how we do things. I have watched us do things that way for 11 years. I opened my email. I looked up the Benton County Sheriff's non-emergency line, and then I looked up the department's public contact address, and I attached every photo from that barn. I wrote maybe 4 sentences. Address, what I saw, my number. I sent it and then I drove home. They called me the next morning, then again that afternoon. A deputy met me at a coffee shop in Des Moines with a printout of my email and asked me to walk him through it. He was polite. He kept saying, ma'am. At the end, he told me not to contact Wayne, which I thought was funny because I had no intention of ever seeing Wayne again. They arrested him about 36 hours after I sent the email. I found out from a news alert on my phone in a Target parking lot in West Des Moines. I read the headline twice, then I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and sat there with the engine running until the AC dried out my eyes. The story that came out over the next few weeks was this. A woman had gone missing from a truck stop near Cedar Rapids in 2016. There had been a person of interest. There had been a search warrant on a property. There had not been enough for a charge, and the file had gone cold. The property in the file was a different one Wayne had owned back then, closer to the interstate. He'd sold it in 2017 and moved. What they found in the 4th pit, I'm not going to write down here. It's in the public record if you want it. I'd rather you didn't look. I gave a deposition in February. The lawyer for the company sat next to me the whole time and kept adjusting his tie. Afterward, in the hallway, he told me I had exposed the company to significant liability by contacting law enforcement directly. He used the phrase chain of custody 3 times. He was maybe 32. His shoes were nicer than mine. I turned in my laptop and my badge the following Monday. I still drive through Iowa sometimes for other work. I take a different route now, not because I'm scared, because the Casey's in Vinton has a particular kind of light in the parking lot at dusk, and I can't sit under that light without thinking about how long I sat there before I opened my email. 40 minutes maybe, not 20. I lied earlier. It was closer to 40. The thing that bothered me wasn't that Rick stayed late. Guys stayed late all the time at the armory, especially the technical staff. What bothered me was that he stayed late on the nights nobody scheduled him to be there. I worked overnight security at a National Guard armory out in Oklahoma, west of the city, off a 2-lane road that ran past a grain elevator and a shuttered feed store. This was May 2022. The building was low, pale brick, with a fenced motor pool on one side and a comm shed at the back. Inside, we had classroom space, a small drill floor, offices for the full-time staff, and the storage bays. My shift was 1800 to 0600, 4 on, 3 off. Most nights I read, walked the halls twice an hour, punched the checkpoints, and drank truck stop coffee out of a thermos. The armory had maybe a dozen full-time employees who ran things when the unit wasn't drilling. Rick was one of them. Technician, mid-40s, kept his beard neat, wore Carhartt jackets even into late spring, had a wife and a daughter, kept a framed photo on his desk. When we crossed paths in the mornings, he was friendly enough. Nothing that made you think twice. I first noticed him staying after hours in early April. I came in for my shift at 6, and his truck was still in the lot. An older, gray Silverado with a bass tournament decal on the back window. That by itself wasn't strange. Sometimes a tech would finish paperwork or wait out a phone call. But when I did my first walkthrough at 7, he was still there, back in Bay 3, one of the storage rooms where we kept some of the equipment for the unit's mission set. I don't want to get too specific about what's in there. He had his laptop open on a rolling cart, and he looked up when I came in and gave me a small, tight smile. "Long day," he said. "Same to you." He said he was finishing a checklist. I moved on. 2 nights later, same thing. Truck in the lot, him in Bay 3, laptop out. This time it was closer to 9. I asked if he needed the door propped or the lights left on. He said no, he'd lock up on his way out. I asked, sort of casually, what he was working on. He said, planned maintenance. I nodded and kept walking, but the phrase sat with me the rest of the shift. There's a log we keep at the front desk. Any after-hours work is supposed to be entered there, or at least the tech is supposed to notify security before staying. It's not a huge deal, more of a courtesy, so we don't roll up on somebody thinking they're an intruder. I flipped back through the pages. Nothing from Rick. Not that week. Not the week before. I didn't do anything about it yet. I told myself the paperwork side of the armory was a mess, and half the guys forgot to log stuff, which was true, but then it kept happening. Over the next 3 weeks, I started keeping a mental tally. Rick stayed late an average of 2 nights a week, always Tuesday or Wednesday, sometimes Thursday, never Friday, never a weekend, always in Bay 3. He varied how long he stayed. Sometimes he was gone by 9, sometimes he was there until almost midnight. On one of those nights, I walked past the bay and heard him talking to somebody, low voice. But when I opened the door, he was alone, and his phone was face down on the cart. He said hello like nothing had happened. The thing that finally moved me was small. It was a Wednesday, around 10. He came out of Bay 3 with his laptop bag and stopped at the front desk to sign out. I asked him how the maintenance was going, just to be friendly. He said, "Slow, you know how it is." Then he tapped the counter twice with his knuckles and walked out. After the door closed, I looked at the sign-in sheet. He'd been there since 1500, 7 hours. Then I checked the maintenance schedule that hangs on the corkboard in the admin hallway. There was nothing on it for Bay 3 that week, nothing for the month. The last scheduled maintenance on anything in that bay had been in February. I sat at the desk for a while thinking about it. Not spooked exactly. It felt more like when you're driving and you realize the car behind you has been making the same turns as you for a few too many miles. You're not sure yet. You want to be wrong. The next morning before I clocked out, I went and knocked on the door of the security officer, a warrant officer named Mel. Ex-MP, quiet guy, kept a clean desk. I told him what I'd been seeing. I tried to be careful with it. I didn't say Rick was doing anything. I just said, one of the techs has been staying late in Bay 3 pretty regular, calls it planned maintenance, and I can't find anything about planned maintenance in the log. Probably nothing, I said, but you told us to bring stuff up. Mel listened without interrupting. When I was done, he asked me 2 questions. First, did Rick know I'd noticed? Second, was Rick ever in the bay with anyone else? I said I didn't think so on the first. I'd tried to act normal. And no on the second, always alone. Mel said thanks and to keep doing what I was doing. Don't change my patrol pattern. Don't ask him any more questions. Don't write anything down where somebody else might see it. If Rick stayed late again, log the time he arrived and left in a personal notebook. At home, not at the desk. I said okay. I asked if I should be worried. He said, just keep your routine. That's the best thing you can do. I went home and slept badly. For the next 2 weeks, I kept the notebook. Rick stayed late 4 more times. On the 4th one, I noticed something new. When I did my 2100 walkthrough, the door to Bay 3 was cracked, and through the gap I could see him holding his phone up over one of the pieces of equipment on the shelf, angling it slow, like he was taking a picture. I didn't stop. I kept walking and did the rest of the loop like nothing was wrong. My hands were fine. My face, I think, was fine. It's easier than you'd think when you already know what you're not supposed to react to. The next morning, I told Mel. He nodded once and said, all right. I didn't hear anything for about 10 days. Rick was in and out during those days like normal. He said good morning. He talked to another tech about a leaky faucet in the break room. He complained about gas prices. Once he brought in donuts. Then, on a Tuesday in late May, I got called into a small conference room I'd never been in before. There were 3 people in there. Mel, a woman in civilian clothes who introduced herself only by first name, and a man in an army uniform. They told me they were going to ask me questions, and that I shouldn't discuss the meeting with anyone at the armory, including my co-workers, including my family. They said it was important I answer honestly, and only about what I'd actually seen, not what I thought. We went through it. Dates, times, what Rick was wearing, where his laptop was set up, whether I'd ever seen him carry anything in or out, whether he'd ever asked me about my patrol schedule. That last one caught me because he had, once, back in March, just in passing. I'd forgotten. When I mentioned it, the woman wrote something down and underlined it. They didn't tell me anything that day. At the end, the man in uniform said, "You did the right thing bringing this up when you did. We may need you again." I gave a formal statement about a week later at a different location. That one was recorded. Same questions, mostly, plus a lot about what the layout of Bay 3 looked like, and where exactly Rick had been standing on which nights. Rick didn't come back to work. One morning, his desk was just empty. His photo of his daughter was gone. Nobody said anything about it. If you asked around, people said he'd taken leave, or that there was a family thing. I don't think most of the staff knew. I know some of the senior guys knew, because they started being careful around me in a way they hadn't been before. Nodding when I walked in, not making jokes. A few weeks after my statement, Mel found me at the desk during a shift change and said he wanted to walk me out to my car. In the parking lot, he told me, in the most general terms he was allowed to, what Rick had been doing. Rick had been photographing specific pieces of equipment, close in, from several angles, with serial numbers and stenciling. The photos had been going out through an encrypted messenger app to somebody Rick had been communicating with for a while. The case had been handed to military counterintelligence, and there wasn't really more he could tell me. He said the pieces of equipment Rick had been focused on were, in his words, the kind of thing that if you knew what you were looking at, you'd know why somebody far away would want to see it up close. I didn't ask more. I stood in the lot with my keys in my hand and looked back at the building, that low, pale brick shape under the sodium lights, and thought about how many nights I'd walked past Bay 3 and just nodded at the man inside. I worked there another 8 months before I moved on. Nobody ever mentioned Rick's name inside the building the whole rest of the time I was there. His truck never came back to the lot. The photo frame stayed gone from his desk. The clinic where I worked took the kids nobody else could handle. Not the difficult ones, the impossible ones. The referrals came from other hospitals, private practices, courts. If a 9-year-old had stopped speaking after something nobody wanted to name, she ended up in our intake room on the 3rd floor of a brick building off Ashland Avenue, and she ended up sitting across from someone like me. Her name was Nora. She came to us in early November of 2022, brought in by an aunt because her mother was in some situation the paperwork described only as unstable housing. Nora was small for 9, fine brown hair, always in her face. She wore the same gray hoodie for the first 3 sessions and did not take it off, even when the radiator in my office kicked on and the room got hot enough that I opened the window a crack. She did not talk. Not to me, not to the aunt, not to the intake nurse. But she drew. She drew constantly. The moment I put paper in front of her, she would pick up a colored pencil. And for the next 50 minutes, she would work with the concentration of someone doing surgery. She never looked up. She never asked what I wanted her to draw. She drew what she drew. People. Always people. One person per page. Standing. Not doing anything, just standing there, facing forward. A man in a red jacket, a woman with a dog on a leash, a boy on a bike. Under each figure, in careful block letters, she wrote a date. Sometimes the date was in the past. Sometimes it was next Tuesday. I did what you were supposed to do with a mute child who draws. I asked open questions. I asked closed ones. I asked her about the people. She would blink at me once and go back to her pencils. The dates I filed away as a repetitive behavior, maybe a coping structure, maybe the way she was building a private language after whatever had happened at home. The first coincidence I noticed in the 3rd week, she had drawn an older man with a hat and a cane, and under his shoes she had written November 16th, 22. On the 17th, the aunt came in for a routine check-in and mentioned, in the small talk way, that a neighbor from her building had passed the day before. Heart, she said, very sudden. He was 78. I did not put it together in the office. I put it together that night, on the L, going home. I remembered the drawing because the man had a very specific hat, a wool cap with a brim. And the aunt had said the neighbor always wore a cap like that. I sat there watching my reflection in the window, and I thought, well, that is the kind of thing you notice because you are tired. The second time was in December. She drew a woman with a small brown dog. The date was December 9th. On the 10th, I was scrolling through local news on my phone during lunch, half listening to a resident complain about billing codes, and I saw a small article about a woman who had been hit by a delivery truck near Lincoln Park. She was walking her dog. The dog survived. I closed the app. I sat there with a plastic fork in my hand, and I could not remember what I had been eating. That afternoon, I photographed every drawing Nora had done since intake. I did it while she was in the bathroom. 23 pages. I put them in a folder on my personal phone, not the work one, and I named the folder something boring so I would not have to look at the name. I want to be clear about what I did next, because I have gone back over this a lot. I did not confront her. I did not tell my supervisor. I did not call the police, because what would I have said? I kept working with her the way I had been working with her. Play therapy, sand tray, cognitive stuff when she would tolerate it. I logged my sessions, honestly, minus the photographs. By January, she was speaking a little, small things, cold, water. Once she said thank you when I gave her a new set of pencils, the fat kind that are easier for little hands. She still drew every session. She still wrote dates. The 3rd one was a boy, maybe 15 in the drawing, wearing what looked like a school jacket with January 22nd, 23 under his sneakers. I told myself I was not going to check. I checked. There was a kid, 16, who fell through the ice on a retention pond in the suburbs that Sunday. The picture in the news article showed him in the same jacket, same team logo on the sleeve. I zoomed in on my phone until the pixels went soft. I stopped eating lunch in the break room after that. I ate at my desk with the door closed. Number 4 was in February, and I did not even know the person. She drew a young woman in scrubs, and the date was February 14th. Valentine's Day, I remembered, because a nurse on our floor had gotten a huge bouquet, and everyone had made a thing about it. I searched Chicago obituaries for 2 hours that night. I found a nurse at a hospital on the north side, 29 years old, no cause listed. Her photo on the memorial page had her in scrubs, the same color Nora had used, teal, not blue. I sat on the edge of my bathtub with the phone face down on my knee, and I did not cry exactly. I just sat there for a while. My cat came in and sat on my foot. The math I did later, when I had time. 7 confirmed by August. 7 people I could match to 7 drawings, out of roughly 40 drawings total across those months. I ran the odds a couple of ways, treating the dates as random within a plus or minus window, treating the demographic descriptors as loose matches, even being generous, even letting myself cheat toward coincidence. The probability was somewhere below 1 in several million. I stopped doing the math after that because the number stopped meaning anything. I did not tell anyone. I want to try to explain this, and I do not know if I can. If I brought the folder to my supervisor, the best case was that she thought I was having a breakdown and put me on leave. The realistic case was worse. Nora had a case file 2 inches thick. Nora had an aunt who was already terrified of losing custody. Nora had a mother somewhere in a system that eats children like her for breakfast. What was I supposed to say? That I think this little girl can see who is going to die, and I have been keeping evidence in a folder on my phone? So I did my job. I did it well, actually. She was talking in full sentences by April. She was making eye contact by June. Her aunt got stable housing in Rogers Park, and the court signed off on placement. Nora was going to be okay, or as okay as any kid in her situation gets. Her last session was the 2nd week of August. Warm afternoon, the kind where the radiators are off and the window is all the way open, and you can hear kids yelling in the little concrete yard 2 floors down. She had done her drawing already, folded it in half, put it on the corner of the desk. She had never folded one before. We did the ending we do. I told her she had worked really hard. I told her she could come back and see me if she ever wanted to, anytime, and that this was not goodbye forever, it was just goodbye for now. She nodded. She had her backpack on already. At the door, she turned around and picked up the folded paper and held it out to me with both hands. "For you," she said. I took it. I said thank you. I waited until she was down the hall with her aunt before I opened it. It was me. Sitting in the chair I was sitting in right then, gray cardigan, which I was wearing, the little silver hoop in my left ear, which I was wearing, my hair pulled back the way I always pulled it back. She had gotten the shape of my glasses right. She had gotten the color of the chair right. Under the figure, where the date should have been, there was nothing, just empty white paper. I stood up too fast and I almost went after her. I got to the door and I stopped, because I did not know what I was going to say. I went back to my desk. I sat down. I picked up the drawing again, and I made myself look at it for a long time. The next morning, I called her aunt and asked if I could see Nora one more time, just briefly. An unofficial thing, coffee at a bakery near their new place. The aunt sounded surprised, but she agreed. We met on a Saturday. Nora had a hot chocolate. She was wearing a yellow shirt I had not seen before. I had the drawing in my bag. I did not take it out. I asked her, as casually as I could, about the picture she had given me. "Why is there no date on this one?" I said. She was working on the whipped cream with a little wooden stirrer. She did not look up. "Because I don't want it," she said. I waited. I thought she was going to add something. She did not. She kept stirring. I walked her and her aunt back to the corner. I hugged her, which we are not really supposed to do, but I did it. I watched them cross the street and go into their building. I still have the drawing. It is in the same folder as the photographs. I have not thrown it out, and I have not framed it, and I have not shown it to anyone, not once, in the 2 years since. Sometimes I think about the 7 others. I think about whether any of them would have wanted to know. I think about the nurse and the boy on the ice. I think about the odds. Mostly, I think about what she said. I have played it back a lot. She did not say, because you are not going to die. And she did not say, because I like you. She said she did not want it. Like a date was something she picked, like she chose. I have not decided yet if that is a comfort. Alright guys, that's all for today. Let me know in the comments what you think, and subscribe if these 4chan stories are your kind of thing. Some of them may sound far away at first, but the right detail can make them feel like they're standing right outside your own window. Don't let that thought keep you up too long. I'll see you in the next one.